Imagine starring in, like, the absolute biggest television show on the planet.
Right.
I mean, 50 million people tuning in every single week to watch you play the most unapologetically confident, hyper-organized woman in New York. You're a household name. You eventually negotiate a contract for, what, $1 million an episode?
Yeah, $1 million episode.
And yet you go home every single night completely convinced that you are a total fraud, that you're totally inadequate and just, days away from being exposed to the entire world.
It's the almost impossible level of cognitive dissonance to wrap your head around, really. Because the public just sees this impenetrable armor of success, right? But the internal reality is someone who's constantly just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. And that profound gap between global megastardom and this hidden internal struggle is exactly what we are exploring with you today. So welcome to today's Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Our map for this journey today is a really fascinating article from June 15th, 2026. It's from Protham Allo, and they used IMDb data to look back at the career of Hollywood actress Courteney Cox on her 61st birthday.
Which is quite a milestone.
Totally. And our mission here isn't just to, recap a celebrity's life. We are diving into how the very thing she was criticized most harshly for, which is getting older, eventually became her absolute greatest tool for confidence.
And it is a phenomenal trajectory to analyze because, you have a person who has lived almost her entire adult life completely under a microscope.
Oh, absolutely.
Facing some of the most intense, just superficial pressures imaginable. Yet the most important developments in her life, the real mechanisms of her resilience, those were being forged completely out of the public eye.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the contrast we are dealing with here is staggering. When anyone hears the name Courteney Cox, the immediate hardwired association is Monica Geller, right? From Friends.
Right, of course.
And Monica is defined by her absolute certainty. She knows who she is, she knows what she wants, and she makes zero apologies for it. But the Protham Allo piece reveals that Cox's actual reality was defined by really profound, agonizing battles with self-doubt.
Yeah, and to really grasp the weight of that contrast, you have to remember the sheer cultural footprint of Friends. I mean, this wasn't just a hit show. It was a cultural monolith.
It really was.
It launched in 1994, it ran for 10 straight years, and it remains incredibly, almost impossibly popular with entirely new generations of viewers right now.
It's always streaming somewhere.
Exactly. And when you achieve that level of total saturation, the line between the actor and the confident character they play, it just completely blurs in the public imagination. We project the character's strength right onto the human playing her.
Right. So to understand how she navigated that, we really have to look at the foundation she was building before the fame even hit.
The early years.
Yeah, let's rewind. So born on June 15, 1964, in Birmingham, Alabama, the source notes that she actually started out studying architecture at university.
Which is a very stable path.
Very stable. But she doesn't finish. She drops out and moves to New York to pursue modeling. And her first really big break doesn't even happen until 1984.
And it was a pretty small break, relatively speaking.
Seriously. It's a gig in a music video, and she is paid exactly $350 for it.
Wow.
But that one tiny job gets her noticed, and it eventually leads to a recurring role on the hit series Family Ties.
And that initial pivot is crucial to understanding her psychology later on. Moving from a track of formal architectural study in Alabama to the complete, utter uncertainty of modeling and acting in New York. I mean, that is a massive structural shift in how you live your life.
I really want to talk about that pivot because it perfectly illustrates this concept in economics called sunk costs.
Oh, yeah.
When you invest a ton of time, effort, or money into something, it becomes incredibly difficult to walk away from it. Even if you deep down, it's not the right path.
Right, because you feel like you'll lose everything you put into it.
Yeah, exactly. And for you, the listener, just think about the sheer terror of changing careers today. Now imagine you're on a socially prestigious, highly stable track like university architecture.
Your whole path is laid out.
Right. To abandon all those sunk costs, all that respectability, to chase something as fleeting and frankly brutal as modeling in New York. And to do it for a break that pays $350, the psychological weight of pulling that trigger is just massive.
What's fascinating here is her foundational relationship with risk. We so often think of risk-taking as these, massive cinematic leaps of faith, like you're risking it all on one spin of the roulette wheel.
Like it's all or nothing.
Right. But the reality of building a career is much more granular than that. Leaving university was the primary risk, yes. But taking a job for $350, that's a micro risk. It's uncalculated.
It's just a tiny step.
Yeah. Because when you step off the traditional escalator of success, like a university degree, where year one leads to year two, leads to graduation, leads to a firm area, you no longer have a predictable path. You are forced to rely on a daily diet of these tiny incremental gambles.
She was essentially forcing herself to learn how to fall and get back up. Because the traditional path gives you a safety net, right? The $350 music video path gives you absolutely nothing but your own hustle.
Exactly. What the Prothom Elo article suggests is that these early uncalculated micro risks are precisely what began building her resilience. It builds a psychological muscle.
That's so.
Well, when you take a $350 gig and figure out how to leverage that into a stepping stone for a massive network show like Family Ties, you learn a vital lesson. Survival isn't about the prestige of the opportunity in front of you. It's about what you manage to extract from the exposure.
That makes a lot of sense. But the narrative has a major twist here, because that early risk-taking absolutely pays off with the ultimate career stability. I mean, she hits the absolute jackpot of television casting.
The biggest one possible.
But ironically, securing that massive external success, getting everything she ever aimed for it, did not make her feel secure on the inside.
No, and in many ways, hitting that jackpot seems to have actively accelerated her internal anxieties.
Let's look at the timeline for a second. In 1994, Friends launches. She becomes a global superstar as Monica Geller, and she doesn't stop there.
Right, she keeps going.
The source points out that many TV actors fail to transition to the big screen. It is a notoriously difficult curse in the industry. But Cox successfully breaks that curse. She continues acting in movies simultaneously, proving she isn't a one-trick pony.
Which is incredibly rare.
Super rare. Yet, despite this massive, undeniable, multi-platform success, the article reveals she suffered deeply from imposter syndrome. At a 2024 event, she openly admitted that for a long, long time, she completely lacked confidence. Yeah. She felt like an imposter, like her success wasn't actually deserved and was just this massive mistake.
It's a staggering admission when you look at the resume she had built by that point.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because I honestly have to push back on the basic premise of how we view success here.
Okay, go for it.
How does someone starring on literally the most popular television show in the world for a decade still feel like a fake? You would naturally assume that after season 3 or season 5, or certainly by season 9, the human brain would finally accept, okay, I am actually good at this, I belong in this room.
You'd think the evidence would outweigh the doubt.
Right, like if I get a single compliment on a presentation at work, I will ride that high for a week.
Same.
She had tens of millions of people validating her every Thursday night for 10 straight years. I think this proves that massive external validation doesn't actually cure internal doubt. Maybe it just acts like a magnifying glass for it.
It sounds completely backwards, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But to understand why a decade of applause didn't fix her confidence, we really need to synthesize what imposter syndrome actually does to the human brain.
Okay, lay it on me.
Clinically, imposter syndrome isn't just a simple lack of confidence. It is a profound cognitive distortion. Your brain actively rejects positive evidence.
Oh, wow.
So if a normal person receives praise, they internalize it as a reflection of their competence. But when someone with imposter syndrome receives praise, their brain interprets it as evidence that they have successfully manipulated or, fooled the person giving the praise.
Oh, man. So the more praise you get, the bigger the con feels. You aren't succeeding, you're just getting away with a bigger crime.
Precisely. And this is why it matters so much, especially when we look at extreme stratospheric success. Success at that level heavily isolates individuals.
That makes total sense.
When you are thrust into the global spotlight like she was in the mid-90s, the stakes become astronomically high. Every movie role that breaks the TV curse, every magazine cover, every award nomination, it just reinforces this terrifying internal monologue.
They're going to find me out.
Exactly. But the higher I climb, the harder the fall is going to be when they finally realize I don't actually know what I'm doing. It's a powerful lesson for you, the listener, as you navigate your own professional successes and promotions. External achievements will never, ever fix an internal deficit of self-worth.
That is a deeply unsettling thought, because if a decade of historic television success couldn't cure her self-doubt, she was left incredibly vulnerable. If your internal foundation is built on the fear that you are an imposter, you have absolutely zero defenses against the toxic, superficial pressures of the industry she was operating in.
And Hollywood in the 1990s and early 2000s was a particularly unforgiving, frankly brutal environment for women navigating fame.
Yeah, according to the Prothom Elo article, Cox faced intense, relentless criticism regarding her age and her beauty.
It was constant.
She was forced to navigate Hollywood's completely unrealistic expectations. And she has been incredibly candid about this recently. She admitted to having past regrets, stating she was overly anxious about her appearance. And she still regrets the medical and cosmetic decisions she made because of that intense, overwhelming anxiety.
Well, when you combine the internal cognitive distortion of imposter syndrome with the external demands of an industry that treats youth as currency, you get a perfect storm of anxiety.
It makes me think of fame like a funhouse mirror.
Oh, I like that.
You know those mirrors at a carnival that stretch you out or squish your face or highlight every single flaw in weird proportions?
Yeah, the really distorted ones.
Imagine walking through life where everywhere you looked, every magazine stand, every television screen, every interview, you only see a distorted reflection of yourself. But worse, imagine millions of strangers looking at that exact same funhouse mirror, pointing at the distortion and telling you, that's who you really are.
That is terrifying.
It warps your own self-image so severely, making it nearly impossible to age naturally or gracefully without just spiraling into panic. How could you not make regrettable decisions when the mirror you are forced to look in is that warped?
This raises an important question, not just about Courteney Cox, but about the specific trap laid for women in the public eye. They're forced to navigate impossible, contradictory standards.
Always.
Hollywood demands that women remain eternally youthful. But simultaneously, it aggressively punishes and mocks them if they show any visible signs of trying to maintain that youth. It's a catch-22.
You literally can't win.
You can't. When your internal baseline is already destabilized by feeling like an imposter, and the external world is applying that funhouse mirror pressure 24 hours a day, the anxiety becomes the only logical response. It completely contextualizes the regrets she so openly speaks about today.
And that anxiety over her appearance and career didn't exist in a vacuum, right? It was colliding directly with massive personal upheaval. The article highlights her high-profile marriage and subsequent divorce from actor David Arquette.
Right, which was highly publicized.
What blows my mind about this era of her life is the sheer emotional compartmentalization required. Going through a split is agonizing enough in private. But she had to navigate the heartbreak and figure out how to co-parent their daughter while paparazzi were actively hunting for photos of her looking exhausted or older or broken.
The emotional toll of that cannot be overstated. You are grieving a marriage, protecting a child, and fighting a daily public relations battle regarding your own face and body, all at the exact same time.
But the source notes that despite the split, she and Arquette maintained a friendly, healthy, co-parenting relationship for their daughter. I think that is a masterclass in compartmentalization under fire.
Absolutely.
It requires a monumental amount of emotional maturity to separate your own personal grief from your parental responsibilities, especially when the media is begging you to fall apart.
It really is. And this period represents the crucial transition phase in her life. She was essentially forced to build emotional resilience the hard way. Surviving both the superficial industry pressures of the funhouse mirror and the deep structural upheavals of her personal life forced a profound recalibration in her 40s and 50s. She had to figure out a mechanism to escape that mirror.
And one of the most vital mechanisms for that escape was actually a biological one. The article points out a very specific timeline detail. She had her child later in life, at age 39.
Which was a big deal back then.
Huge. In an industry and frankly a society that constantly tells women their biological and professional clocks are ticking down aggressively, choosing to trust her own timeline was a massive act of defiance.
That detail about having her child at 39 is so important because it physically forces a realignment of priorities. When you become a parent, the brain's focus shifts from external validation to internal stability.
You don't have time for the noise anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You suddenly have a real, tangible human being to protect. The funhouse mirror of Hollywood opinion matters significantly less when you are trying to raise a child. It breaks the spell of the industry.
It's like the ultimate grounding mechanism, which leads directly into the most fascinating part of this Prothom Alo piece, how that recalibration birthed her current philosophy on life. Let's look at the reality of her life right now at age 61. It looks entirely different from those anxious decades.
Night and day.
The article notes she boasts a net worth of roughly $150 million.
And we have to pause and look at the mechanics of that wealth. Because it's not just a big number, it's a structural safety net. That $150 million is fueled heavily by long-term Friends royalties, plus her ongoing acting, producing, and business ventures.
Right, let's talk about those royalties, the syndication money, because the way that works is actually central to her current freedom.
It changed everything.
During the run of Friends, the cast famously banded together to negotiate not just their episodic salary, but back-end syndication points. They get a percentage of the revenue every time the show is sold and aired anywhere in the world.
Forever.
So decades after the show ended, checks just keep arriving. It's not a salary, it's an annuity.
Exactly. And understanding that economic mechanism is vital because it actively rewires the brain's threat response. In Hollywood, the constant terror is, if I age, if I lose my looks, I won't get hired and I won't survive. Syndication wealth severs that fear.
It builds a wall around you.
It builds a financial fortress. You no longer need the next job to pay your mortgage.
And this is a huge, but money alone clearly didn't fix the internal issue. Because she had that syndication money in her 40s, and she still felt the crushing anxiety. The wealth isn't the real story here. The real story is her mindset shift. She is quoted in the article saying, "As I grow older, I have learned to take more risks. Now I am not afraid to make any decisions."
That is a complete 180-degree turn from the woman paralyzed by imposter syndrome.
It really is. And she goes even further. She notes she is hyper-conscious of her time now, actively seeking only good work. And this is my absolute favorite quote from the piece. She says, "If I don't want to do something, I can say no now, which I couldn't do before."
The power of no is arguably the rarest commodity in any high-stakes industry.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the $150 million net worth, it is incredibly easy to just cynically say, well, of course she can say no, she's rich.
Right, people love to dismiss it like that.
And sure, a $150 million fortress definitely makes it easier to turn down a bad script. But I think we all know people who have all the money in the world and are still chronic, terrified people pleasers. They are still obsessed with the funhouse mirror and terrified of losing relevance. The ultimate luxury she has achieved isn't financial. The true wealth here is the emotional independence to actually enforce those boundaries.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is the intersection of financial independence and the earned wisdom of age. That intersection is what creates true autonomy.
Yeah.
For a long time, she had the money, but she didn't have the emotional armor to go with it. She still felt like the imposter who couldn't afford to disappoint anyone. What she is articulating now at 61 is that the process of getting older itself was the missing ingredient. We have this culturally backwards idea that risk-taking is purely a young person's game, that you take your wild risks in your 20s and then you just play it safe forever.
Right, the $350 music video phase. We think that's the only time you get to be brave.
Exactly. But her story proves that sometimes the most profound risks you will ever take, the risk of disappointing other people, the risk of saying no to a powerful person, the risk of finally trusting your own judgment over the crowd's risks, those risks require a lifetime of experience.
You have to earn them.
It takes decades of navigating the funhouse mirrors, the divorces, and the shifting sands of public opinion to finally realize that you are the only one uniquely qualified to architect your own life.
Yeah.
Age didn't diminish her. Age finally gave her the permission she spent her entire youth searching for.
Age gave her permission. I love how that frames it. It brings us full circle to the very mission of this deep dive. When we look at the facts presented in this Prothom Allo article about Courteney Cox's journey to 61, the core takeaways are incredibly powerful.
They really are.
First, success is never a straight line. You can literally be the biggest star on television and still be fighting a quiet, exhausting war with imposter syndrome. Second, external validation will never fix an internal foundation. No amount of applause cures the feeling of being a fraud. You have to do that work yourself. And finally, the most surprising takeaway of all, aging is not a detriment. In a world that constantly tells us to fear getting older, aging can actually be a superpower. It is the very mechanism that grants you risk tolerance and the ability to build impenetrable boundaries.
It is a blueprint for reclaiming your own narrative piece by piece, year by year.
Which brings this right back to you, listening right now. Looking at the gap between Cox's massive external success and her hidden internal journey, it forces a mirror onto our own lives. We all have those obligations we hate, but we do them anyway because we feel we haven't earned the right to say no yet.
We all do it.
We feel like imposters in our own careers. Courteney Cox's story is a reminder that the permission slip to say no doesn't come from a boss, or a bank account, or an award. It just comes from deciding your time is finally too expensive to waste.
And as you think about where you need to apply that power of no in your own life, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about how at 61 she became hyper-conscious of her time. In our lives, time is the single only currency that actually appreciates in personal value as we get older.
Oh, that's a great point.
We objectively have less of it left, so every single hour becomes more expensive to spend. Are you spending your current, highly valuable hours on things you genuinely want to do? Or are you spending them appeasing people whose opinions won't matter a decade from now?
It really makes you look at your own schedule differently. Because if you find yourself running on a treadmill of expectations, staring at a funhouse mirror that makes you feel inadequate, maybe the bravest micro risk you can take today isn't working harder to please the crowd. Maybe the bravest risk is just finally saying no.